Work and learn. Meet Light Meet Max. සක්‍රිය කර ගැනීමට MySLT app එකට log වෙන්න. Work and learn. Meet Light Meet Max. සක්‍රිය කර ගැනීමට MySLT app එකට log වෙන්න.
දසනකාන්තී චූර්ණය සහිත liver ආයුෂ් දන්තාලේපය දත්වල ඇති ප්‍රශ්න 10ක් වළකයි.
Tonight, setting an example, President Ranil Wickremesinghe says Sri Lanka expects creditors and stakeholders to support the country's debt sustainability efforts.
It is incumbent upon Sri Lanka and our creditors to set an example of how good faith can result in sustainable solutions to sovereign debt issues.
Unpredictable. IMF says the timeline regarding the finalization of staff-level agreement with Sri Lanka cannot be predicted despite the country's plans to have it finalized by December. Times of need. European Union deploys 1.5 million euros in humanitarian aid for Sri Lanka. Questionable. Even though the National Council held its inaugural meeting today, Field Marshal Sarath Fonseca says the council does not serve its purpose.
That council is supposed to be People's Council, but we have ended up with a council of members of parliament and they are representing their parties. They will be working as per the agendas of the parties.
All this and much more coming up tonight this Thursday, the 29th of September 2022.
Vim Deara milliliter CA Smart Pack එක රුපියල් 85ට දැන් වෙළඳ පොලේ.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening and a very warm welcome. This is AdaDerana 24 English News and I'm Andrew Bernard. Now, President Ranil Wickremesinghe called on Filipino President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. today ahead of the Asian Development Bank meeting. But before that, let us take a look at President Ranil Wickremesinghe's address at the ADB. At the ADB, he told the regional finance and economic planning ministers, other senior government officials and representatives of multilateral development banking community that it is Sri Lanka's expectation that creditors and all stakeholders will support the country in efforts to restore debt sustainability and help get it back on a path of inclusive and sustainable economic growth. Addressing the annual meeting of the ADB Board of Governors in the Philippines today, President Wickremesinghe warned that the Asian region is yet to deal with the economic crisis that continues to aggravate due to geopolitical rivalries. The 55th annual Board of Governors meeting of the Asian Development Bank got underway in the Philippines today under the chairmanship of President Ranil Wickremesinghe.
The developments on the global stage have further aggravated the self-inflicted economic crisis in Sri Lanka, resulting in a political outburst that led to a change in government. Today, we have stabilized the economy and many countries and stakeholders are keenly monitoring how we resolve this crisis. We are well aware that the evolution of Sri Lanka's economic crisis includes both domestic policy elements as well as external shocks. It follows that the resolution of the crisis also requires both domestic efforts and the support of external partners. It is incumbent upon Sri Lanka and our creditors and the partners to set an example of how collaborative and good faith action can result in sustainable and equitable solutions to sovereign debt issues. Towards this end, we have already undertaken major macroeconomic policy reform measures. I am pleased to inform you that we have now reached a staff-level agreement with the International Monetary Fund on a 4-year program supported by the Extended Fund Facility. The program is aligned with the commitment of the government to implement an ambitious and comprehensive package of reforms that will help restore the sustainability of our public finances, addressing external imbalances and restarting our growth engine through structural reforms and improvement in governance. Amidst major economic stress, Sri Lanka is undertaking an unprecedented fiscal effort as part of our commitment to restoring the country's debt sustainability. It's our hope and expectation that Sri Lanka's creditors and all stakeholders will support us in this effort to restore our debt sustainability and help put the country back on the path of inclusive and sustainable economic growth. Asia has still to overcome the present global economic crisis. Unlike the financial crisis of 2008, in this instance, the economic levers alone are insufficient to stimulate global economic recovery. The factors underlying the main crisis is not only of economic origin, but are also the consequences of evolving geopolitics. The results being the absence of cooperation amongst the G20, unlike the earlier crisis. The Ukraine war on one side and the US-China rivalry, spurred on by military, trade and political differences on the other side, are key contributors to this breakdown in cooperation. Added to this geopolitical rivalry are the droughts, floods and pandemics, which are still present in Asia. All these challenges are compounded by the absence of global leadership. Developing Asia is facing a bleak future. Surging inflation, tighter monetary policies, decline in European output, weakening of exports is leading to a weaker economic prospects for South Asia and East Asia. The geopolitical rivalry to determine the contours of the Asian power balance by the mid-century has resulted in the inability of the major countries to give leadership to overcoming the key crises that are threatening the prosperity of the region. The resolution of these major economic and environmental issues is unfortunately interwoven with the global geopolitical crisis. We must overcome the geopolitical rivalries to address the major threats to our existence. Otherwise, we will all fail, leading to instability in our region, reminiscent of Europe after World War I. On the other hand, our ability to successfully meet these challenges will lead to remarkable process in raising the living standards of our people through the rise of the economies of our member countries.
Now, President Ranil Wickremesinghe called on Filipino President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. today ahead of the Asian Development Bank meeting. During bilateral discussions, President Wickremesinghe and the Filipino President have agreed to strengthen bilateral relations through new mechanisms. After concluding his official two-day visit in Japan, President Ranil Wickremesinghe flew to the Philippines yesterday to participate in the ADB's 55th Board of Governors meeting. Upon arrival in the Philippines, President Wickremesinghe met with Filipino President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. The Sri Lankan president was accorded a warm welcome amidst a ceremonial guard of honor at the Malacanang Palace. President Wickremesinghe then engaged in bilateral discussions with the Filipino head of state, during which greater emphasis was placed on further strengthening the long-standing bilateral relations between Sri Lanka and the Philippines through new approaches. President Ranil Wickremesinghe said that the long-standing friendship between Sri Lanka and the Philippines would be promoted by developing Asian regional cooperation. Now, the International Monetary Fund has stated they're unable to give certain particular time frame regarding the finalization of the $2.9 billion bailout package despite Sri Lanka's expectations. Senior Mission Chief for Sri Lanka Peter Brewer and Mission Chief for Sri Lanka Masahiro Nozaki stated that finalizing the staff-level agreement depends on how fast Sri Lanka's creditors come to an agreement with the country regarding restructuring its debt. Despite the expectations of the Sri Lankan authorities to have a $2.9 billion bailout package given through the staff-level agreement with the International Monetary Fund finalized by the end of this year, the multilateral lender has cautioned that the time frame remains uncertain. The international lender further stated that the ability of the IMF to get the staff-level agreement finalized by the end of the year depends on the discussions with the heavily indebted country's creditors. Senior Mission Chief for Sri Lanka Peter Brewer and Mission Chief for Sri Lanka Masahiro Nozaki, in written comments to Nikkei Asia, said that it is difficult to predict the timeline as the process of debt relief discussions takes time and that all parties involved in the process should move expeditiously so that Sri Lanka can emerge from the crisis as quickly as possible. Sri Lanka was able to reach a staff-level agreement on the 1st of September after holding months of discussions with the officials. Last Friday, Sri Lanka's Finance Ministry held an online presentation for external creditors to explain the situation and discuss the next step towards restructuring. Sri Lankan officials called for the formation of a unique ad hoc coordination platform for all bilateral creditors, which they believe would expedite the process of obtaining financial assurances from multiple creditors. They explained that such a group would allow official bilateral creditors to give such assurances to the IMF collectively after discussing the matter among themselves. The day before, President Ranil Wickremesinghe chaired a meeting with ambassadors from 23 Paris Club and non-Paris Club countries, including Japan, France and India, to discuss related matters. President Wickremesinghe appealed to all creditor countries to offer the financing assurances on debt sustainability the IMF has said are essential for the board to give the final green light. Now, taking the socio-economic crisis in the country into account, the European Union has released humanitarian aid worth €1.5 million to Sri Lanka. The newly proposed EU funding will mainly focus on multi-purpose cash interventions to respond to the basic needs of the population, which includes food, health, education and protection. Moreover, the humanitarian assistance will target the households that need immediate support. Commissioner for the Crisis in the European Commission, Janez Lenaric, said the European Union reaffirms its support to the most vulnerable and will support humanitarian response on the ground. And we'll be back with more news after this short break.
අයිනෝ පුතා හැබැයි යා ගෙදර නිදියන්නෙම අමෝතු තැනක.
කාලගුණය කොහොමුණත් රයිනෝ නං වහලට සේෆ් තමයි මුළු ගෙදරම. Rhino Cement Roofing Sheets. Then you know Rhino. I know.
Big 3.
Uber Eats මගින් ඉදිරිපත් කරන ආදරයෙන් අවශ්‍යතා ඇතියට අත්‍යවශ්‍ය භාණ්ඩ පරිත්‍යාග කිරීමට වේදිකාවක්.
Welcome back. Now, the inaugural meeting of the National Council was held this morning under the patronage of its chairman, Speaker of Parliament Mahinda Yapa Abeyewardena. During the meeting, a discussion was made to appoint 2 subcommittees related to the national policies and economic stabilization in the National Council. Further, the Council is also expected to convene on Thursday every week. The National Council that is responsible for guiding the Parliament on the formulation of short, medium and long-term national policies and also on agreeing on short to mid-term common minimum programs related to economic stabilization held its inaugural meeting today under the patronage of its chairman, Speaker of Parliament Mahinda Yapa Abeyewardena. Opposition leader Sajith Premadasa, who is a member of the council, did not attend the meeting due to prior arranged public gatherings. However, Samagi Janabalawegaya parliamentarian and chief opposition whip Lakshman Kiriyala and other members of the party Rauf Hakim, Rishad Badiuddin, Mano Ganesan and Palani Digambaram participated in the inaugural meeting. As announced last week, members of the Supreme Lanka coalition that have 4 members in the National Council, including Udaya Gamman Pilla and Vasudeva Nanayakkara, boycotted the meeting. During the inaugural meeting, a decision was made to appoint 2 subcommittees related to national policies and economic stabilization in the National Council. According to the Communication Department of the Parliament, the purpose of setting up the Subcommittee on National Policy is to set the common priorities of Parliament to guide the formulation of medium and long-term national policies. The purpose of establishing the Subcommittee on Economic Stabilization is to reach agreement on the short and mid-term progress related to economic stabilization. At the meeting today, a decision has been made to convene the National Council weekly on Thursdays.
විශ්වාසනීය ජීවන රටාවකට රට ගෙනීමට හැකි අවස්ථාව ඇති කරගමු.
නිදහසින් පසු වසර 74ක කාලයක් විකල්ප වශයෙන් දක්ෂිණාංශික සහ වාමාංශික ලෙස නැඹුරු වූ ප්‍රතිපත්ති අත්දැකීම් අපේ රට දීර්ඝකාලීන ප්‍රතිපත්තියක් සඳහා වූ අවශ්‍යතාවය මෙම ජාතික සභාවට තිබිය නැහැ. සාරාංශයක් ලෙස පැවතුනොත් අපේ රට පාලනය කළ යුත්තේ වීදුරු පෙට්ටියක් ඇතුළේ සිටමින් මහජන විශ්වාසය යලි දිනාගත හැකි ලෙසින්.
After the meeting, parliamentarians expressed their views on the National Council.
ඉතින් මම අද ජාතික සභාවේ කිව්වේ ආණ්ඩුව ප්‍රමාද වෙලා හරි මේ කරන වැඩේ හොඳයි. නමුත් මේ විශේෂයෙන්ම මුදල් සම්බන්ධයෙන් තියෙන කාර්ක සභා ආණ්ඩු පක්ෂයට දුන්නොත් ඒගොල්ලෝ කවදාකවත් ඒ ආයතන වල තියෙන අඩුපාඩුකම් හෙළිතරව් කරන්නේ නැහැ.
ජාතික එකගතාවයකට පැමිණීමට අවශ්‍ය කරන සාකච්ඡාවක් ඉතාම සාර්ථකව අවසන් වුණා.
විපක්ෂයෙන් තමයි මේ යෝජනාව ගෙනාවේ. ඒ අයගෙත් වගකීම මේවට සහභාගී වෙන්න ඕනේ. එතකොට තමයි රටේට අපිට කණ්ඩායමක් හැටියට එක්කහුව වෙලා මේකට මොන දෙන්න පුළුවන් වෙන්නේ.
විවෘතව කටයුතු කළොත් සාර්ථක වෙයි. අවංක නොවුනොත් ඒකත් තව ව්‍යසනයකට පාර කපයි.
Meanwhile, parliamentarian of the Samgi Janabala Vegya, Field Marshal Sarath Fonseca, is of the view that the National Council does not serve the purpose it was originally intended to. Speaking to Indivari Amwata on our current affairs program at Hyde Park on AdaDerana 24, the former army commander said the opposition does not have a role to play given the current setup and call for transparency in the governance and a government free of corruption and abuse to bring about change.
Would you not agree that some progress has been made since the May 9th or July 9th incidents on the political front?
No, I don't think any progress has been made. Of course, some people have left, some people have come. Other than that, still we can settle the debts we had taken. Then we continue to borrow money. Still, although you don't see the queues on the road, availability of the fuel, gas, all that, the shortage is still there. They introduced some system where people can go to a petrol shed when it is their turn to go, so that they don't have to stay on the queue, spend days and days on the road. Other than that, the cost of living is going up day by day. Every day is going up. Income of the people has not increased. So I don't think there's an improvement has been made in any aspect. Only we are going to IMF. IMF is assisting us to a certain extent. At the same time, they are exerting a lot of pressure on the people because things like electricity, gas, food, everything is going up in price, skyrocketing. So therefore, I don't think the pressure has been taken away from the people. And it doesn't look like politicians are working on a particular plan or anything. They're just moving in the dark.
But you yourself are a politician now, and there's the National Council that has been established, and there doesn't seem that Parliament is coming together here.
No, we are doing the job of the opposition in the Parliament. We are not the ruling party. We have no responsibility in ruling the country. We are trying to identify the shortcomings or the failures on the part of the government, and we are highlighting them. But then it is up to the government to react, respond, and overcome the issues. About the parliamentary council, you said that council is supposed to be a people's council, that you are the people asking. But finally, we have ended up with a council of members of parliament, and they are representing their parties. So I don't think it will make a difference because they will be working as per the agendas of the parties. That is what they will be doing in that council. That be just another political gimmick. Of course, the people ask for a council from the people, from the public. I don't think even that is practicable.
But what do you suggest as the alternative, Field Marshal?
No, there is nothing new we need actually. There are a lot of people having different opinions about the election system and the constitution and various things. From what I can see, we have a constitution. There are countries doing very well without constitutions, like countries like UK. We have a constitution which will give the guidelines. On the other hand, we have the rules and regulations. We have the acts. So the problem is the people are inefficient who are handling this. The politicians, they are not being smart enough. They are not handling them effectively. On the other hand, the agendas are different. They are corrupt political agendas, and they are working in a corrupt political culture. As far as this going on like this, the country will not go on the right line.
What would be the alternative for us right now if we are to change the present circumstances in order to address the current crisis? What do you think should be done different?
What I feel is there should be a good leader for the country. I don't know whether all these things will fall in line. You can't do it overnight maybe, but at some stage these things will have to take place. A good leadership who will have seen good leaders in other countries like Singapore or Malaysia. In the West, of course, the leaders have been good most of the time. And then a good leader who will have a vision, who will give priority for the forward march of the country, the developing the country, not doing various things, wasting time trying to retain in power and win the elections, and also please the people by giving various odd reliefs and various things, and identify the priorities. Have a short-term and a long-term plan, obviously. Otherwise, at least a mid-term and a long-term plan. Of course, he had to be priority to stop the corruption, stop the abuses, stop the waste, and be transparent, everything must be audited properly. If you compare with the developed countries, those things are not happening in this country. So changing the president and being another president will not change the country.
Now, a spot tender has been advertised following the international competitive bidding method for the supply of 300,000 metric tons of coal. According to the Minister of Power and Energy, Kanchana Wijesekara, it has been opened for registered suppliers and any supplier who is capable of supplying coal with a minimum 180-day credit facility. He added that the long-term tender for coal procurement will be advertised by next week. The advertisement for the spot tender states that the chairman of the Special Standing Cabinet appointed Procurement Committee of the Ministry of Power and Energy invites bids for the supply of coal for the 900 megawatt Lakvijay coal power plant from registered suppliers and any prospective coal suppliers, and that the invitation is extended by the Lanka Coal Company on behalf of the said committee. Now, the debate on the draft of the 22nd Amendment to the Constitution will be held in Parliament on the 6th and 7th of October. According to the Communications Department of Sri Lanka Parliament, the decision was made at the Committee on Parliamentary Business that convened this morning under the patronage of Speaker of Parliament Mahindayapa Abewardana. The committee also decided that Parliament would convene from the 3rd of October to the 7th of October. Welcome back. In your business news, Sri Lankan shares closed slightly lower today due to sharp losses in the financial stocks. The all-share price index settled 0.07% lower at 9,951.48. It is, however, set to post gains for the month ending on Friday for a third straight time. Conglomerates LLC, Development Finance and Expo Lanka Holdings were the top drags on the index, falling 10.1% and 1.2% respectively. Trading volume on the CSE all-share index rose to 214.2 million shares today from 181.1 million in the previous session. The equity market turnover was 3.44 billion Sri Lankan rupees compared with 3.13 billion rupees in the previous session. Foreign investors were net buyers in the equity market, purchasing 139.6 million rupees worth of shares, while domestic investors were net sellers, offloading 3.34 billion rupees worth of stocks. Now, a Gazette Extraordinary has been published specifying the regulations pertaining to the Colombo Port City Economic Commission. The Gazette notification mentions the regulations of the registration and licensing of an authorized person and other services related to the Commission. According to the Gazette, application fee for an authorized person stands at $2,500 while the annual fee is $2,000. The second reading of the Colombo Port City Economic Commission Bill was passed in Parliament with a majority of votes in May last year. Later, then President Gotabaya Rajapaksa established a 7-member Colombo Port City Economic Commission headed by President's Counsel Gamini Marapana. And that's all we have for you this evening. Join us again tomorrow at the same time. Good night.